Sarah Johnson was a single mother in her mid-30s, living in a modest apartment in a vibrant American city. Every day was a struggle, but Sarah was a fighter. She worked 2 jobs to support her 9-year-old son, Ethan, during the day as a nurse's assistant at a local clinic and in the evenings as a server at a diner. Despite her exhausting schedule, she always wore a smile and greeted her neighbors with warmth. She made it a point to spend quality time with Ethan, helping him with his homework even after long, grueling shifts. One particularly hot summer evening, Sarah finished her shift at the diner, exhausted but determined to bring home a little treat for Ethan. He loved the cherry pie from the diner, and she had saved a slice just for him. As she walked home, the streets were quiet, dimly lit by flickering streetlights that cast eerie shadows on the pavement. The comforting scent of fried food lingered in the air, but Sarah's stomach churned from fatigue. As she approached her building, she noticed a patrol car parked at the curb. 2 officers stood nearby, their voices echoing through the stillness of the night. Initially, she thought nothing of it. Police presence in her neighborhood was common, and she had never had any issues with them. But as she passed by, the officers turned their gaze toward her. Their expressions were hard and unwelcoming. "Hey you, where do you think you're going?" one called out, his voice dripping with authority. His name tag read Officer Smith, a tall, broad-shouldered man whose presence seemed to fill the street. His partner, Officer Ramirez, was shorter but equally intimidating, leaning casually against the patrol car, a smirk plastered on his face. Sarah stopped, startled. "I'm just heading home," she replied softly, clutching the paper bag tightly as if it could shield her from their scrutiny. "Home, huh?" Smith stepped closer, invading her personal space. "You got ID? Let's see it." Sarah's heart raced. She felt an inexplicable chill run down her spine. She wasn't doing anything wrong, but their aggressive tone made her feel as though she had committed a crime. Trembling, she reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. Smith took her ID and scrutinized it as if searching for a reason to arrest her. "Sarah Johnson," he read aloud, dragging out her name as if mocking her. "You're not from around here, are you?" "I've lived here for years," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the fear swelling inside her. "I work at the clinic and the diner just down the street." "Sure you do," chimed in Ramirez, his smirk widening. "You look like trouble to me." Sarah's heart sank. She felt the weight of their hostility pressing down on her. She glanced around, hoping for a neighbor or passerby to intervene, but the street was empty. Smith handed her ID back but took a deliberate step closer, his towering frame casting an ominous shadow over her. "You know, people like you are the reason this neighborhood's going downhill," he sneered. "Excuse me?" Sarah whispered, feeling her chest tighten as she fought to remain composed. "You heard me," Smith replied, his voice dripping with disdain. "Why don't you take your illegal self back to wherever you came from?" Sarah's hands balled into fists, not out of anger, but from the effort it took to stay calm. "I'm not illegal. I have every right to be here," she said firmly, though her voice wavered, betraying her fear. Smith's expression darkened, and he reached into his pocket, pulling out a cigarette. He lit it slowly, deliberately, as if to intimidate her further. Ramirez laughed, watching the scene unfold like it was some twisted performance. Sarah felt frozen, unsure of what to do. Then, without warning, Smith pressed the lit cigarette against Sarah's forearm. The pain was immediate and searing. Sarah screamed, stumbling backward, her bag falling to the ground, the smell of burnt skin filling the air. "Oops," Smith said coldly, as if it were a mere accident. Ramirez laughed again, reveling in the chaos. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she clutched her arm, confusion and agony overwhelming her. "Why are you doing this to me?" she cried, her voice cracking. "You'd better watch yourself," Smith warned, his voice low and menacing. "Next time you won't get off so easy." With that, the officers got into their patrol car and drove away, leaving Sarah standing there, shaking and in agony. She felt a mix of humiliation, anger, and sheer terror, her mind racing with what had just happened. The next morning, Sarah went to the clinic where she worked and had the burn treated. Her colleague, Emily, noticed her distress and immediately asked what had happened. At first, Sarah hesitated. She was terrified. What if speaking out made things worse? But as she looked at Ethan's picture on her phone, she knew she couldn't let fear silence her. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said, her voice trembling. Emily listened intently as Sarah recounted the horrific encounter with the officers. By the time she finished, Emily's face was pale with shock. "Sarah, you have to report this," she insisted firmly. "They can't get away with it." With Emily's unwavering support, Sarah filed a formal complaint against the officers and reached out to a local journalist named David Thompson, known for exposing corruption in the police force. David met with Sarah, listening intently. "This isn't just about you," he said, his expression serious. "If they did this to you, they've probably done it to others. We need to make this public." Though the thought of reliving the incident terrified her, Sarah agreed. Over the next few weeks, her story spread like wildfire. Local news outlets picked it up, and protests erupted across the city, demanding justice for Sarah and accountability for the officers involved. The public outcry was overwhelming. People from all walks of life joined the protests, holding signs that read, "Justice for Sarah" and "End Police Brutality." The city was alive with voices demanding change, and Sarah felt a surge of empowerment she had never experienced before. Months later, after a long and grueling legal battle, Smith and Ramirez were fired from the force and faced criminal charges. Sarah's bravery inspired others in the community to come forward with their own stories of mistreatment, leading to a broader investigation into systemic racism within the police department. The investigation revealed a pattern of abuse, and the community rallied together, demanding reforms and greater accountability for law enforcement. Sarah's courage had sparked a movement, and she became a voice for the voiceless, advocating for justice and equality. Though the scar on her arm remained, a painful reminder of that fateful night, Sarah found strength in knowing that her suffering had led to change. She became an advocate, speaking at rallies and community meetings, reminding others that their voices mattered. Through it all, she continued to remind Ethan, and herself, that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope. As she watched her son grow, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was not just fighting for herself, but for Ethan's future and the future of their community. Sarah's story became one of resilience and empowerment, showing that even in the face of adversity, one person can make a difference. Her journey was far from over, but with every step forward, she was determined to create a better world for her son and others like him.